this point. So our next speaker is Dr. Scott Ventureyra. Scott completed his PhD in philosophical theology at Carleton University, Dominican College, in 2017. He has published in various academic journals. He has also written many articles for magazines and newspapers. He has presented his work several times at the Science of Consciousness conference, and he is the author and editor of several books, including On the Origin of Consciousness. He founded his own publishing house, True Freedom Press, in 2020, where he has published and edited several books and is working on editing and publishing several more. So today he's going to be speaking to us on, and this is the title of his paper, Truth, Intelligibility, and the Physical World. So I turn the floor over to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Nick. So I'll just get started. In this paper, I will examine how we come to affirm truth and how this is necessary to have reliable knowledge of the world. What I do not mean in the context of this paper is to examine whether I can trust my sensory perception, raise skepticism about phenomenal experiences, or question the reality of the world outside my mind. Although important, I do not intend to engage in debates about Cartesian demon thought experiments, Platonic cave illusions, cosmological explanations like the Boltzmann brain thought experiment, hypotheses about physical reality being a simulation, or the varieties of solipsism. It is inescapable that the human experience is permeated with many beliefs that cannot be proven nor disproven, including, for example, belief in the external physical world, our own minds and other minds, and that the past was not suddenly created with the appearance of age, just to name a few. Epistemologists and philosophers of religion, Alvin Plantinga and William Alston, have referred to these types of beliefs as self-evident axioms, also known as properly basic beliefs. Belief in God is also included in this type of belief. So given this conception, belief itself, particularly in the aforementioned examples, is intrinsic to humans. These things have to be presupposed and cannot be proven or disproven, but to assume them suggests that they are reliable as opposed to unreliable beliefs to have about reality. This would correspond with the world being intelligible. Moving forward, I believe there are many reasons to think that we do have reliable knowledge of the world, but I propose one central argument to justify this claim. This particular proposal does not necessarily extend to other ways of understanding the world, which may extend beyond reason alone, such as intuition and faith, none of which work in isolation. Some of these come under the domain of supra-rational ways of knowing the world. Given this proposal, I will first discuss some philosophical attempts that challenge our ability to affirm truth, which, if successful, would affect our ability to have reliable knowledge of the world. I will then briefly assess various theories of truth. From there, I will then provide an argument for intelligibility, which includes discoverability with respect to mathematics and the physical universe, as a justification for reliable knowledge of the world. We live in an era where the denial of not only the ability to discern what is true from what is false runs rampant, but also the rejection of objective truth itself. Interestingly, everyone speaks about truth, whether it's politicians, doctors, journalists, celebrities, athletes, academics, or the common person, but rarely are they capable of providing a succinct definition of truth. Admittedly, when the question is scrutinized philosophically, it is not an easy task. Nevertheless, all too often in common parlance, the truth is intended to be or referred to as something that is possessed or owned. For example, the truth is referred to being as my truth, your truth, their truth, our truth. And all too often we hear the mantra, that is your opinion, or statements such as, that may be true for you, but not for me, which inherently is meant to shut down any further discussion. After all, if truth is based on subjective experience, who's to tell you that you are wrong? For example, whenever my daughter repeats such lines, I respond, some opinions may be better than others, and furthermore, some may actually correspond with truth and how things may actually be. I vividly recall as a master's student at this university, one of my professors uttering in a lecture that there was no such thing as truth. When I questioned this professor as to whether that was true, she responded that she meant that there was no truth with a capital T. Then I pressed further and asked her whether that statement was true, but regrettably the point seemed to be lost on this professor. In the end, for this and other reasons, I did not press the issue any further. Another common issue, in addition to truth denial, is the constructivist idea of the doctrine of equal validity. This epistemological outlook can be summarized best in the following way. There are many radically different yet equally valid ways of knowing the world, with science being just one of them. Although demonstrably incoherent, it is a view that has become widespread throughout the academy and popular culture. Philosopher Paul A. Boghossian, in his book Fear of Knowledge Against Relativism and Constructivism, explains why this doctrine has wide-reaching implications for epistemology in particular, and philosophy and society in general. Open quote. Equal validity then is a doctrine of considerable significance, and not just within the confines of the ivory tower. If the vast number of scholars in the humanities and social sciences who subscribe to it are right, we are not merely making a philosophical mistake of interest to a small number of specialists in the theory of knowledge. We have fundamentally misconceived the principles by which society ought to be organized. There is more than the usual urgency, then, to question whether they are right. Now, holding on to these strange ideas may come from a place of good intention, such as some virtuous reasons to uphold social justice in their minds, but it seems to be a misstep in critical thinking. This is why Boghossian provides a book-length refutation of such views. This challenge of affirming objective truth is vital to all endeavors in life, not just academic pursuits. If all viewpoints and outlooks are equally valid, then it is impossible to ascertain truth and even come to attain reliable knowledge of the world. To be sure, these are repackaged arguments articulated over 2,400 years ago by pre-Socratic philosopher Protagoras. The claim that objective truth does not exist is a self-contradictory one, since to deny its existence is to affirm it. Similarly, the claim that all positions are equally valid is demonstrably false. This is a matter of basic logic. Unless one is a metaphysical subjectivist, constructivist, or a postmodernist, such a claim is uncontroversial. Either way is incontrovertible regardless of one's beliefs. There is no escaping this fact. Aristotle stated this very succinctly. To say of what is, it is not, or of what is not that it is false. While to say of what is, that it is, and of what is not, that is not, is true. Without this, it would be impossible to have any reliable knowledge of the world, or even approximation or inkling toward how things may actually be. The most notable, commonly held and commonsensical theory of truth is the correspondence theory of truth, or what is known as metaphysical realism. Under this theory, a proposition is true if it corresponds with the facts, where X is true if and only if X corresponds to a fact. Other widely discussed theories of truth among philosophers include the coherence theory of truth, where X is true if and only if X is a member of a coherent set of beliefs. The verificationist theory, where X is true if and only if X is provable or verifiable in an empirical sense under ideal conditions. The pragmatist theory, where X is true if and only if X is useful to believe. And deflationary theories of truth, including the semantic theory of truth, where we can say that the sentence El cielo es azul is true if and only if the sky is blue, and others. Given these discussions, things can become very complex quickly, especially when taking into consideration deflationary theories of truth. Consider the difficulties that arise when we ponder what the nature of a fact is, and whether there are distinctions between brute facts, general facts, negative facts, and hypothetical facts, for instance. This, in turn, raises a complex issue of the nature of propositions and their relation to facts. As philosophers Simon Blackburn and Keith Simmons indicate, some have taken propositions to be creatures of the mind, for only thinkers think things that are true or false. But what then is this complex in the mind that represents facts outside of it. Others take propositions to be abstract structures, but then we would need to know both how the structure corresponds with the facts and also how the mind gets into a judgmental relationship to the complex. Still others hope to dispense with proposition in favor of sentences." Close quote. Going further, if one holds the view that a fact is a true proposition, then critics of the correspondence theory of truth argue that they cannot be sentences, statements, or beliefs. Facts can then possibly be considered abstract entities expressed in or designated by sentences. Furthermore, there are distinctions between facts, theories, and values, and they are also to be distinguished from objects, complexes, relations, and wholes. For example, a theory can never be a fact since a theory is set to explain a particular fact or series of facts. Nevertheless, there are substantive counter-arguments to each of these theories of truth that challenge the correspondence theory. The fruit of these theories is that they force us to be very specific in the language we choose to use to develop our arguments. These objections do not undermine the validity of the correspondence theory of truth. They just raise more questions that require clarification and objections that require adequate responses. Here are some counter-arguments to consider for each of these theories. Each treatment could occupy a large volume, thus our treatment will be brief, so we can clear the landscape for the central argument of this paper. A main problem with the coherence theory of truth is that the term coherence is never actually accurately defined. Typically, what is said is that two or more beliefs cohere if they agree with or fit with one another. So something is true as long as a set of beliefs agree with or fit together. Related to this is an additional objection, which is known as the specification objection. For instance, if we take three differing views on evolution and creation, one could argue that young Earth creationism may be comprised of a coherent set of beliefs, if one accepts a number of presuppositions, and that this is equally true of old Earth creationism and theistic evolution. But nothing within the coherence theory makes it impossible for these differing sets of beliefs to all be internally coherent. That is, given the coherentist framework, there is no way of affirming that one view is true and that the other two are false. Such a position violates the law of non-contradiction, since there can be only one complete set of truths, and therefore the coherentist must provide a way of outlining how these sets of beliefs do not contradict one another. Although different, the coherence theory of truth in this context bears some semblance to the above-mentioned doctrine of equal validity, insofar as they suffer from the same objection. The pragmatist theory asserts that a proposition is true if it is useful to believe. However, it may be useful for one person to believe a certain proposition and likewise useful for another to disbelieve it. Take, for instance, that some people take comfort in believing in a personal God, while others would be disturbed that there is an immaterial and omniscient being who keeps a record of our actions and thoughts. So by symmetry of the argument, the proposition is rendered false and violates the law of non-contradiction. The verificationist theory is severely undercut when one takes its criteria for truth on its own terms and asks if a sentence is only true if the proposition within it can be verified empirically. This is revealed to be self-refuting since that sentence itself cannot be verified empirically. The semantic theory makes truth an issue of linguistics and alleges that there is no issue so long as you define the parameters, axioms, and terms from the beginning. But some critics would argue that this is merely definitional and seemingly tautological. Many philosophers find other deflationary theories of truth attractive, since they provide a simplified definition of truth and a description of the meaning and function of what is true. Deflationists allege that a truth does not have a nature, and assigning truth a nature does not justify the truth of a claim like the sky is blue. Deflationists also claim that the truth is not a property, so if a proposition is true, then it is a mistake to state that the proposition has the property of being true. But interestingly, in another way, they do not deny that propositions have the property of being true. For instance, consider two of the following propositions. Number one, Ottawa is the capital of Canada. Number two, A water molecule has 3 atoms, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Now, they do not deny that these statements are both true, but they deny that they are of the same kind. When we say 2 propositions share a property X, we typically mean that they are both X. But they would argue that the truth of the first proposition has to do with political history of Canada, while the other has to do with the chemical properties of water, which have nothing to do with one another. They would argue further that since there is no shared explanation as to why each proposition is true, they do not have a property in common. This method of analysis raises further questions such as, what does our understanding of true consist of? How can one explain the meaning of true using a limited system of thought? I believe the answer to these questions delivers a severe blow to many deflationary theories of truth. One of the main problems with deflationary theory is the description of what is true. According to logician Anil Gupta, deflationary theories need to make very strong claims about what is true. This approach, which is demanded by such theories, is highly problematic upon closer examination. Whereas the weaker sense of what is true gives more plausibility to deflationary theories, he argues that they cannot produce any deflationary conclusions. The ontological commitments and meta-language that the deflationist seeks to avoid at all costs are inescapable. As philosopher Johnny Thompson recognizes, the problem is that these truth-making rules are themselves expressed in the language that needs truth-making. As such, we need some kind of meta-language to define truth. As demonstrated through this exercise, one of the great challenges throughout history of human thought has been our ability to make correct affirmations of the world, whether it pertains to historical, scientific, medical, philosophical, theological, or other forms of knowledge. In other words, attempting to understand reality as it actually is no simple feat, if possible. Given that the state of all these competing theories of truth, and if we take into account the criticisms of each, considering which theory best explains the available information, we can make an inference to the best explanation and opt for the best competing theory. Thus, the correspondence theory is one that is best capable of explaining truth while avoiding the pitfalls of the rest, and is therefore conducive to scientific inquiry while incorporating the use of logic and mathematics as justifications for scientific claims. Having now addressed some contemporary philosophical issues, I would like to present an argument that demonstrates that we do indeed have reliable knowledge of truth and how it applies to the physical world. It is important to point out that the evolution of human thought and knowledge is a testament to our belief in things that have been shown to be false, or at the very least, an incomplete picture of the world. It is an evolving enterprise in many respects. This is to be expected since human thought is finite and limited in scope. This by no means undermines the use of the correspondence theory of truth, but rather is a testament to its use and the self-correcting nature of ascertaining truth. This is reflected in science and every mode of thought. To complicate matters even more, over the past 100 years or so, with the advent of quantum mechanics and the many interpretations of it, the realization of the complexity of this problem of truth discernment has only increased. For instance, although intuitively it does not make sense to the human mind how an object can be located in 2 places at once, or how a particle can also be a wave at the same time, it is vital for physicists to accept this in order to be able to unlock the usefulness of quantum theory. However, this should not deter us from making affirmations about the world. It is important to note that the experimental predictions of quantum mechanics have been confirmed to an incredibly high degree of precision. An example of this is in quantum electrodynamics, which has been shown to agree with experiments to within 1 part in 108 for some atomic properties. Despite this difficulty in certain contexts of attaining accurate knowledge of the world, I will argue that it is possible in the world of mathematics and its applicability to understanding and discovering the structure of the physical universe. The closest tools to ascertaining truth are found in mathematics and formal logic. Bertrand Russell put it this way: mathematics, rightly viewed, possesses not only truth, but supreme beauty, cold and austere, like that of a sculpture without appealing to any part of our weaker nature, without the gorgeous trappings of paintings or music, yet sublimely pure and capable of stern perfection, such as only the greatest art can show. The true spirit of delight, the exaltation, the sense of being more than man, which is the touchstone of the highest excellence, is to be found in mathematics as surely as in poetry." Close quote. Russell argued that in order to describe the world adequately, it must be done in a way that we are not misguided by the accidental and imprecise nature of natural languages, as he states in his book, The Scientific Outlook, which is a work that examines the nature and breadth of scientific knowledge. Open quote. "Ordinary language is totally unsuited for expressing what physics really asserts, since the words of everyday life are not sufficiently abstract. Only mathematics and mathematical logic can say as little as the physicist means to say," close quote. It is rather remarkable how mathematics corresponds so neatly with the physical world. The Hungarian-American theoretical and mathematical physicist Eugene Wigner, in his paper titled "The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics," recognized this strange coincidence when he stated, "The miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift, which we neither understand nor deserve." Close quote. Contrary to Wigner, I will contend that this correspondence between mathematics and the natural world is not an undeserved happy accident that we do not understand, nor is it an accident as Russell would posit with his logical atomism, but rather one we would anticipate given Christian theism, which holds that an omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient God created the world, and that the universe is created in such a way that it can be unraveled by humanity. God, understood as such, functions as a guarantor for reliable knowledge of the world. Both Russell and Wigner, despite their acknowledgement of the importance of mathematics, physics, and the universe's orderliness, failed to provide a reasonable explanation for not only truth, but also the comprehensibility, discoverability, and this very orderliness found in mathematics and its applicability to the world. Jacques Maritain, on the other hand, recognized the obvious, but obviously not so obvious to modern ears, namely that if nature were not intelligible, there would be no science. He then rightly alludes to this grounding of intelligibility when he asks, "Now how would things be intelligible if they did not proceed from an intelligence?" His analysis continues by affirming a transcendent mind when he states, open quote, "In the last analysis, a prime intelligence must exist, which is itself intellection and intelligibility in pure act, and which is the first principle of the intelligibility and the essences of things, and causes order to exist in them, as well as an infinitely complex network of regular relationships, whose fundamental mysterious unity our reason dreams of discovering in its own way," close quote. Historically, it is this very belief in the Christian doctrine of creation that acts as a guarantor for the rationality of the universe that scientists can unravel. The universe is dependent on God and wholly other than God, a belief that allowed for the rise of modern science. As a physicist and theologian Robert John Russell explains, open quote, "Historians and philosophers of science have shown in detail how the doctrine of creation ex nihilo played an important role in the rise of modern science by combining the Greek assumption of the rationality of the world with the theological assumption that the world is contingent. Together, these help give birth to the empirical method and the use of mathematics to represent natural processes," close quote. Essential to this line of argumentation is the understanding that finite intelligibility is grounded in complete intelligibility. In other words, humanity's intellect is able to understand nature because of an eternal, transcendent mind's creation, which functions as a blueprint for physical reality. The fact that we are able to formulate general laws of science, use mathematics and logic, possess the ability to communicate and discern truth in its various manifestations, is a reflection of an unbounded intelligibility, the sort of thing we should expect if there is any correspondence between reality and our minds. There is a functional relationship between the precision and the orderliness found in nature and our ability to understand it mathematically. The assumptions regarding the intelligibility and rationality of reality shape much of the empiricism in science, as did the use of mathematics to describe the processes found in nature. Indeed, modern science was deeply inspired by theological insights and understanding. This is especially true of great scientific minds such as Isaac Newton, Johann Kepler, René Descartes, Galileo Galilei, and Nicholas Copernicus, who posited that the structure of physical reality was knowable. These explicitly theological ideas, according to which there is intelligibility and comprehensibility in reality because of God's role as creator, inspired scientists to adopt a type of reverse engineering mode of thinking, where humans could possibly even modify and perfect creation in order to understand how things were created. This was precisely the mode of thinking practiced by Isaac Newton. It should come as no surprise that humans have mimicked a dragonfly's ability to fly, for instance, into any direction, up, down, forward, backward, or even just hover in the design of helicopters and their bidirectional abilities. In a similar way, although we did not know it at the time, we initially developed computers and computer software. DNA has information-carrying properties that are like computers. We need powerful tools like electron microscopes to be able to see things in microorganisms and realize that they live in a world with much more advanced technology, so to speak, than our own. This in turn has helped us further develop our understanding and development of computer systems. It should come as no surprise that Microsoft founder and multi-billionaire Bill Gates observed in his book, The Road Ahead, that human DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. Theoretical physicist Paul Davies, in a similar fashion to Jean Wigner, ponders why it is that our minds are able to discover mathematical truths to underscore the book of nature. In his book, The Mind of God, he states the following: "The mystery in all this is that human intellectual powers are presumably determined by biological evolution and have absolutely no connection with doing science. Our brains have evolved in response to environmental pressures such as the ability to hunt, avoid predators, dodge falling objects, etc. What has this got to do with discovering the laws of electromagnetism or the structure of the atom?" John Barrow is also mystified. Why should our cognitive processes have tuned themselves to such an extravagant quest as the understanding of the universe, he asks. Why should it be us? None of the sophisticated ideas involved appear to offer any selective advantage to be exploited during the preconscious period of our evolution. How fortuitous that our minds, or at least the minds of some, should be poised to fathom the depths of nature's secrets. Close quote. In their book, The Privileged Planet, how our place in the cosmos is designed for discovery, astrophysicist Guillermo Gonzalez and philosopher Jay Richards lay out a scientific argument with deep metaphysical implications. They provide a host of different lines of evidence to suggest that the Earth occupies a special place in the cosmos. Their argument provides different layers of fine-tuning that require mathematical precision on a razor's edge. Their argument also goes against the popular notion held by many scientists and that was popularized by Carl Sagan, namely that the Earth does not have a special or unique place in the universe. Instead, Sagan said that it was just a pale blue dot or some small accident in the universe. His book and the saying were inspired by a famous photograph taken of Earth on February 14, 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe, which depicts the Earth as an insignificant point in the vastness of the universe. This is strongly connected to the misnamed Copernican principle, which Gonzalez and Richards refute. Gonzalez and Richards argue that there is a deep correlation between habitability and scientific observability. In other words, the fact that we exist on a particularly special type of planet, that is Earth, is also related to the fact that we are in such a place with purpose to observe the universe and discover, measure, and understand much of the cosmos. They provide examples of the correlation between habitability and measurability. Richards and Gonzalez illustrate in a scientific manner the very intelligibility that is grounded in such a theory as the correspondence theory of truth. It is remarkable that one discovery piggybacks on the next. For example, without Newtonian mechanics, the general theory of relativity would be practically inconceivable to humans. It is what philosopher of physics Robin Collins has dubbed hierarchical simplicity. It seems as though our limitations of knowledge were instantiated by God through a feedback mechanism in the universe until we acquire a certain level of understanding to progress to a higher level of knowledge. Much like the student in math who requires comfortable knowledge in algebra, geometry, and trigonometry prior to being able to understand calculus. The history of thought is no different. Mathematical physicist Alexei Burov and philosopher Lev Burov, citing Eugene Wigner, point out that it is a mistake to think of scientific progress as one mistake after the next, but rather as one discovery being augmented upon the next. They explain this in terms of asymptotic precision. The law discovered earlier still gets to keep its power not only as a convenient, simpler, and often more than sufficiently precise formula, but moreover as an exact mathematical asymptote of the law of the next level. Classical mechanics, for example, is an exact mathematical limit of relativistic mechanics when the speed of light approaches infinity. It is also a asymptote of quantum mechanics when the Planck constant tends to zero. Thus, to base an objection to the physical Platonism on the imprecise qualities of laws is too imprecise. The adequate characterization of laws is not approximation, but asymptotic exactness. Of course, we do not know and most likely will never know the Platonic forms of nature in their fullness. Naturalistic outlooks cannot explain this great affinity between the correspondence of our minds to understand nature. That is, that the universe is intelligible through applying mathematics to physical existence. Any hypothesis devoid of divine mind has to be written off as either a happy coincidence or inexplicably the result of necessity as a brute fact without further explanation, regardless of the evidence against it. Such explanations have weak explanatory power. It is not only our ability to understand nature mathematically, but also our ability to create and design things that point us in the direction of a transcendent mind that acts as a reason for all these possibilities. All of these theories of truth we examine trivialize the significance of truth and do not capture its real essence or substance. The correspondence theory of truth is the most adequate one amongst its competitors to make affirmations about the world. The competing theories of truth, particularly deflationary theories, neglect that there is something intuitive, incredibly simple, yet also mysterious about truth that causes wonder about the nature of reality and how we come to understand it. All of these competing theories tell us nothing about intelligibility, comprehensibility, or the discoverability of the world. The correspondence theory necessarily makes sense in light of our example from mathematics to describe the physical world. It gives us grounding for the scientific endeavor and the use of mathematics and logic. Although as a species we have made many errors throughout the course of history, this does not preclude our ability to ascertain truth and our current noetic state. We do not have perfect and absolute intelligibility, actually far from it, and have only learned part of the mystery and truth behind the universe and God, something that is to be expected for finite beings. As time passes, and with God as the source of comprehensibility and the sustainer of reality, we are able to inch our way closer to some of these truths that are yet to be unraveled. This does not take away from the remarkable ability we have to discern many aspects of physical reality through elegantly simple equations in physics, one predicated on the previous theory as our minds gradually discover these truths. Now, if we venture even beyond that of the scientific and philosophical pursuit into a more profound and ultra-mundane reality, we enter into the realm of the eternally transcendent, where we encounter the most mysterious of all truths, its personification in the God-man Jesus of Nazareth, who boldly claimed, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." A truth that grounds all truths. For Christian, truth is ultimately grounded in the person of Jesus and the Trinitarian Godhead, and that makes all the difference in not only understanding truth and the universe, but our place in it, and as creators ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for that very nice philosophical reflection on truth and intelligibility. It's very rich, going to the basics, down to the basics of epistemology and metaphysics. So let's open up the room to questions. Frank?
Thank you for your talk, Scott. Lots of characters embedded therein.
Yes.
Go back to something you said at the outset about that professor and the capital T truth. And
Yes.
You pointed out, the internal formal contradiction there, the self-contradictory nature of that position. I suspect that your riposte there did not change my mind at all.
No, not at all. No, I wanted to let it go to just be polite too.
Yeah,
But
yeah. You could send me her name later. But anyway, why do you think that's the case? I mean, we dealing with something that's just psychological here, or is it cultural? Is it just the historical situation? Because we're in a very historicist sort of culture right now.
And I mean, I could say as a general thing, I think it's because the shift in trends in our culture. Boghossian, in that book that he wrote with Oxford University Press, he challenges the doctrine of equal validity. And one of the reasons he's doing that is because he sees this infecting all of the academy and throughout culture. And the reason this is occurring, I think, is because people are latching on to these social justice ideas, and to say it's like, okay, Christianity is superior than Islam as an example. I mean, that would not really lend itself very well to any political discourse or any kind of bridge building at all. But we just can't say that anymore. So I think by holding on stuff that we know is wrong, it's like we're doing this to appease and because of political correctness. I think that's part of the problem. And also in this particular case of this professor, I think her thinking was infected by a lot of the postmodern thinking, like Jacques Derrida and maybe Foucault, and how it's infused itself in because she's a theologian, but it's infused itself into theology as well. So I think to a certain degree, which is sad to say for a professor, maybe she hasn't reflected deep enough into these issues. I don't know. I let it go there because I have respect for her, and it was just if you press further, it gets very awkward, right? So.
What's the name? Boghossian? I just wanted that.
Boghossian,
How do you spell that?
Boghossian. I think he's like Armenian roots or something.
Boghossian.
Yeah, Boghossian. Boghossian. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced. Boghossian, I think.
Andres?
Yeah, I just got a question. Let's say these philosophers or theologians that say there is no such thing as truth, do they not recognize like there's truth in the natural world? Like, I mean, let's say you want to wire a house, or something like this. There's only one way to connect everything to your electrical outlet. You don't do it the right way, it won't work. The light somewhere will not go on or something. I mean, there's
it's
one way to do things properly.
for sure. Yeah, no,
You make many mistakes, but
there's a functional, there's a functional nature to truth,
or
right?
Like your car, like an internal
Absolutely.
combustion engine, you can't repair a starter problem or an alternator problem 10 different ways. I mean, the motor's built that way.
Absolutely.
So
they try to neatly separate it. They try to neatly separate it and they bifurcate it in their minds in some way.
So there's like truth in the material world, but there's no truth in the conceptual world.
It seems as though that's what they're doing. They're compartmentalizing their thoughts. And it's a strange thing, right? But you see it more and more becoming pervasive. but a lot of it has to do with just, I think it's like for reasons of political correctness as well. And I mean, there's like an impetus towards that, right? To try to, I mean, people are very afraid to say anything in the academy, and you guys would know better than me now, but but I mean, I made correspondence with a lady who got kicked out for questioning the I forget which university, for questioning some of the indigenous happenings.
The graves.
Frances Widowson, yeah. But the reason I got in communication with her was because of Rick Maida, this guy I was publishing works for, who's a total nut job. But anyways, I learned the hard way with that guy. But anyways, he's taken free speech to another level. But it's an interesting exercise on the limits of free speech. But yeah.
Any real bones yet. They just say there are.
Oh right, yeah, right. That's exactly.
Digged up,
That's her exact argument. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
let's see how many bones there are.
yeah.
So I think maybe.
Yeah.
This is sort of a half-baked thought, but I'll give it a shot. One of the things that has always puzzled me about this question of why does mathematics work? Why does it correspond to reality? And I've often, as I've studied more math, I've thought that that's an overly romanticized view of mathematics, right? Because it implies, many people say, oh, you know, isn't it amazing that the mathematics that Einstein used was discovered decades earlier, right? And then, you know, like the geometric formulation of general relativity was known decades earlier. Tensor calculus was old by the time Einstein came around. And isn't that amazing that he had this thing and then bang, the mathematics was there. Because he didn't develop the math for it.
Right.
And so, you know, like, is there some pre-established harmony or something between the human mind? I mean, Leibniz talks like that. I even wrote a paper on that a long time ago.
Right.
And I used to be more sympathetic to that, but I've become, you know, like, when you think about the theoretical structure that Einstein used, you know, basically, you know, a certain kind of manifold theory, right, that was defined by Riemann. There are just multiple kinds of manifolds. So the fact that you could articulate zillions of different kinds of models, right? Yeah, one of them's probably going to fit, right? It seems a little less romantic when you say, well, there's tons and tons of possible, mathematics can just generate models, like it's a four-dimensional manifold. Physicists or mathematicians like look at that and go, yeah, that's a very special case manifold. But we talk about zillions of kinds of manifolds. We talk about manifolds on which you can't do calculus, right? Which all the mathematics doesn't work. So you build in a whole bunch of stuff, and then you get the manifold the mathematical manifold that's applicable in general relativity. But there's zillions of other kinds. So it's a little bit more like it's not like they just came up, like Riemann just came up with one and that happened to be right. It's like it's like, you know, it's like a shotgun. There's like zillions of things. Mathematics generates all kinds of manifolds that have different structures that don't fit anything, right? That, you know, and then eventually they find that one fits. So prior to Einstein, everybody thought those Riemannian manifolds were just of mathematical interest, and that's it. But one of them seems to be taken up. Oh, like,
well, that's why I mentioned
doesn't that
it's
kind
like
of deflate the whole, you know, the sort of the mathematics kind of. I don't find.
But there's something.
That interesting,
there's still something deeper, right? It's
you know,
why can we even have all these different examples? Why is it even there? The use of mathematics as a tool.
Yeah.
Like if you get right to the heart of it, yes, I mentioned it's like we can make mistakes. We have made a lot of mistakes throughout scientific history, throughout philosophical thought. I made so many in my paper probably, but that doesn't change the nature of the correspondence theory of truth. It doesn't change that we can actually
no, it
apply.
doesn't, but it kind of deflates the whole thing but at least that's sort of what I'm thinking, is that there's just so many possibilities that can be laid out.
But there is a sort of succession, right? It's like, could we discover like quantum mechanics like prior to Newtonian mechanics? I guess we could imagine something like that. But it's like it seems like it's an augmentation, right? Like
yeah, but that could be just a historical contingency. I mean, you know, I mean, think about if we had have had the discovery of computers before quantum mechanics, right? Really, you know, and then computers were used to build up a theory. We'd probably say, well, could we have done quantum mechanics without really having computer technology? We might be saying that, right? Like a lot of the great stuff was discovered in good old analog kind of, you know, hard work form. So I'm just not sure what to make of this, because I think sometimes we see the order of things and we think it's probably more important than it is. And we have a narrative that's very strong about science advancing, right? And I'm not so sure. I'm just not so sure of that.
Well, one issue
Isn't it just amazing that we can find that order some way or another, and that we can find out which mathematics works and which doesn't?
Well, that's the kind of the point I'm trying to make. But yeah, no, exactly.
That we can penetrate it
I'm
using our
not sure if
minds.
it's amazing, though.
But there's another one that's another example where we're talking about, you know, computers and okay, so we can refer to electron microscopes, right?
Yeah.
We can look at low life. We call it low life, but it's like amazingly complex, right? The intricate structures of the cell. It's beyond anything we could even fathom of creating. And in that, some scientists say that gives me an eerie feeling, like it was already, there was a mind behind this, right? I mean, you can try to explain it away. I mean, through some unknown processes of evolution, who knows?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is we've advanced so much technologically, and then we're using this technology that's even more primitive to observe technology as way beyond us. And that's considered low life, these microorganisms, right? Their primitive ancestors existed way before us, right? So.
But if you look at the history of mathematics, like it's grindingly slow, right? Just, you know, and you know, I read a paper a little while ago, people were getting extraordinarily excited about the fact that in certain equations in quantum mechanics you have imaginary numbers. And people were deriving, you know, sort of arguments about, well, isn't this fascinating that, you know, these imaginary numbers are built into the fabric of nature? I mean, imaginary numbers have been around for centuries and, you know, used in certain kinds of cubic equations and things like that, and nobody got all that excited about it. So, yeah, maybe I've read too much Wittgenstein, and I always say, calm down, so don't get so excited.
Wittgenstein is right, because look, they don't, they're not coming up with a theory just within mathematics, the theoretical development of mathematics, say, okay, this is going to explain the world or something. They're responding to other problems, symmetrical asymmetries and that in their discipline. I mean, you look at any of the big advances in math in the last 200 or 300 years, and symmetry is beautiful. Truth is beauty, right? And that's what they care about the most. So I don't think they're motivated by an amazing explanation of something in nature, or this is going to correspond.
In the mathematical tradition?
In a mathematical.
No, it's actually a fairly insular tradition. I mean, you know, and so lots of things were around for centuries before they were developed in all different kinds of directions. And I mean, even the stuff in manifold theory, like there are developments post-relativity in manifold theory that talk about, you know, like it's almost, the order is not always from the simple to the complex, right? So, like, we were working with more complex manifolds that, you know, where you can do calculus and you can do all that stuff. And it was later where mathematicians started to peel these things back and do, you know, kind of the underpinnings of that, you know? Like set theory came long after. You know, so the simpler stuff came later. So it seems to be a little more random, and you know, I'm not saying anything against what you've been arguing here. I think it's all very interesting that the human mind can do this stuff.
Well, the other dimension is,
from it.
But the other dimension, that's why I mentioned the book, The Privileged Planet.
Yeah.
Like they have an interesting argument. It's like that our space in our particular location in the cosmos allows for this discoverability, and you can say that's tautological, maybe, I don't know, but there's something there that's profound as well, right? And you can't just write it off, like, you know, guys like Dawkins will try to write it off without any kind of deeper thought into the matter, but there is this deep connection with discoverability and incomprehensibility, right, as well, and then our place in the cosmos as well, but
Yeah, I think there is a great claim to, the rare earth hypothesis,
Yes.
as opposed to the Star Trek hypothesis, where there's civilizations everywhere.
And they all kind of look like us, except they're green.
Yeah, so I am sympathetic to
But they can't
going
be
off
that.
almost into fine-tuning arguments, but anyways, thank you.
Let's get one final question from Jermaine. Oh, sorry, did you have a question?
Well, I mean, go ahead.
Okay, Jermaine, go ahead.
No, it was just a small comment. In the social sciences, we do not have that same strong assumption of some kind of progress, as you will find in the hard sciences. Within sociology itself, we have at least three competing paradigms on how to do how to provide the discipline, and they are they are kind of irreducible to each other. So if we don't see in any foreseeable future the rise of an overarching one that will kind of leave the previous one obsolete and explain everything, like you find in physics, for example. So that also adds to the conversation in the sense that I think the assumption of progress is also very much rooted in the natural science realm. In social sciences, at least when you take things seriously, you don't find that. Of course, you can turn a given theory into ideology and to actually push everything in that direction, and I think that's happening. That's sociology at least in Canada nowadays. But that's clearly not what any serious sociologist or social thinker would say, right?
Right. I think even if,
to add this to the conversation you were having.
yeah, even if you apply this to biology, for instance, it's like, after the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species, so it took, 15, 20, 30 years to be widely accepted. But even at that, now it's like we're going back and we're saying, well, there's things that are going back to kind of an Aristotelian understanding, or it's like a design perspective as well. So these things are not linear necessarily. They could be cyclical as well, right? So, I mean, there could be combination of some kind of design theoretic with evolution, which is something I tend towards, but it's not to say, I agree. It's not obvious that scientific progress is totally linear. I think, in physics, it seems to be a lot more successful than biology, that's for sure. Biology is such a soft science that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's sometimes has made, evolutionary biology, for instance, doesn't seem like it's made that much progress, and there's a lot of problems with the paradigm, the neo-Darwinian paradigm. It's not to say anything about common descent, for instance, but the mechanisms are in question, and design perspectives are on the table, which were ridiculed for 50 to 75 years. So
there's problems with the Darwinian paradigm because of the science, or just the theory itself, or
sorry.
There's problems with the Darwinian.
Oh yeah,
paradigm
right.
because of
Right. The
science.
it was the synthetic version, the neo-Darwinism. So there's issues with that, like the the strict dual mechanism of random mutation and natural selection, selecting for these accumulation of random mutations, which are mostly deleterious, right? They're harmful to the organism, and so it's supposed to account for every feature of every living organism and everything, which is like a fantastical theory if you really take it for what it's worth. But there's tons of more mechanisms out there, and there's more openness to that. Like Lamarck, like for instance, if you go back now, Lamarck, who was ridiculed, and Darwin followed Lamarck, now we're discovering stuff in microorganisms that suggests that Lamarck might have been right about some things. So again, I agree with you that it's not totally linear, and there's like, some cyclical things in science as well, in the natural sciences. Yeah.
Okay, I think on that note, we'll have to bring Scott's paper to a close, and we thank him for his paper. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll just take a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back for our final